It was just after 9 p.m. when I heard a knock, sharp, impatient, and way too loud for that hour. At first, I thought maybe it was a neighbor needing help or someone with the wrong house. But when I peeked through the blinds, I couldn't believe. Who was standing on my porch was Karen. HOA Karen. If you've ever dealt with a power-hungry HOA board member, you already know the type. Clipboard in hand, flashlight under her arm, lips tight like she was ready to lecture the devil himself. She was pacing back and forth on my porch like she owned the place. I hadn't even processed it fully when she banged on the door again, this time shouting something about unpaid dues. Mind you, it was a Thursday night. Who in their right mind goes door to door demanding HOA payments like a debt collector? After dark. Especially when there was no notice, no email, not even a heads up. Just her standing there, uninvited, trying to intimidate me into handing over money on the spot. I opened the door just a crack, enough to tell her this was not okay, but the way she leaned in like she had legal authority over my front steps made my blood boil. She said if I didn't pay right then and there, she'd start reporting violations and get the board involved. And that's when things really started to spiral. I told her calmly to leave. She refused. Then she stepped onto my property and invited. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just some weird HOA business. It felt more personal. Something was definitely off. But what happened next? I didn't see coming. Let's just say, by the time the cops pulled up, Karen wasn't pacing anymore. And the way she left my house, let's just say it wasn't. On her own 2 feet, to really understand how we got to this point, you need to know a bit more about Karen and our neighborhood HOA. When I first moved in, everything seemed peaceful. The community was quiet. People kept to themselves, and the HOA wasn't too involved. But that all changed about 6 months ago, when Karen somehow became the acting president. Nobody really remembers voting, and honestly, I think she just slid into the role when the old board stepped down. Ever since, she's been on a power trip nitpicking yard lengths, mailbox paint, even the color of porch lights. She's one of those people who walks around with a measuring tape and a phone camera, always ready to document violations. At first, I tried to stay under the radar. I kept my lawn trimmed, paid my dues on time, didn't throw parties or break any rules. But Karen, she still found reasons to leave warning notes on my door. Once, it was about a flower pot being non-compliant. Another time, she claimed my recycling bin was out too early by 10 minutes. Then came the weird letter 2 weeks ago, saying I was behind on dues. Thing is, I'd already paid. I had the receipts and everything. I emailed the HOA contact listed at the bottom, no response. Called the number voicemail full. When I finally saw Karen in person and brought it up, she brushed me off and said she'd double-checked the records. I figured that was the end of it. Clearly, I was wrong, so when she showed up at my house that night, demanding cash in hand, it wasn't just unprofessional, it felt almost threatening, and the way she stood there, like she had the upper hand, made my gut twist. Something just didn't sit right. But I had no idea it would all come crashing down so fast, so publicly, as Karen stood on my porch, still waiting for me to hand over some mystery HOA dues in cash. I kept thinking about all the strange stuff that had been happening lately. A week before this, someone had taken pictures of my house up close. I only noticed because my neighbor, Mr. Peterson, saw a woman walking around my driveway and thought it was a realtor. When he described her, I didn't even need a name. Clipboard, short blonde hair, same smug attitude. It was Karen, and then there was the issue with the neighborhood Facebook group. About a month back, posts started disappearing. Anytime someone complained about HOA decisions or asked for a copy of meeting minutes, the post would vanish within hours. A few folks even got blocked. I used to think Karen was just annoying, but now it felt more like she was trying to control everything how we talk. how we live, even how we pay our bills. My neighbor across the street, Tasha, had her own run-in. Karen fined her for having her trash bin on the sidewalk 5 minutes early on trash day. 5 minutes. Tasha tried to fight it, but the so-called violation got escalated to a warning letter about her lease. She's been anxious ever since, even installed a camera by her door. There was definitely a pattern here. One by one, she was targeting homeowners who didn't bow to her every word. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about money. Karen was using the HOA like her personal weapon, finding tiny rules and bending them to bully people, and that night on my porch, with her eyes locked on me like I was the one out of line, I realized something deeper was going on. This was personal. Now, she wasn't going to back down, but neither was I, and what neither of us knew at that moment is just how far this was all about to go. It all started on a quiet Sunday morning when I went to shut off the main water valve to my home so I could fix a leaky pipe in the basement. Simple, right? My house, my water, my business. But the moment I turned that valve, I had no idea. I was about to spark a full-blown war with the woman 2 doors down, Karen. And not just any Karen. This one's married to a lawyer who's also a cop. Yeah, you heard that right. Within hours, she was at my door, screaming about how her water had suddenly gone off too. I was confused at first. How would shutting off my own water affect hers? Turns out, our houses were connected to an old shared system no one had bothered to update since the 80s. I calmly explained the situation, even offered to have someone check the lines. But Karen wasn't having any of it. She accused me of intentionally cutting her off, said I was trying to control the neighborhood, and warned me I'd regret this deeply. I thought she was bluffing. But the very next day, I got served with a legal notice and official lawsuit demanding $10,000 in damages for emotional distress and unauthorized utility tampering. And who signed it? Her husband, the cop lawyer. My jaw hit the floor. How could someone actually sue me for turning off my own water in my own house? Now I'm stuck in this nightmare, trying to defend myself against 2 people who clearly know how to work the system. But here's the thing: they didn't expect me to push back. They didn't expect me to uncover what I did next. And trust me, what I found out changed everything. So before you think this is just another Karen story, buckle up, because it gets way crazier from here. So here's a bit of background on this Karen. Ever since she moved into the neighborhood, she's been trying to control everything from how tall your grass should be to where you can park your car. She even once reported a neighbor for having too many garden gnomes. No joke. Most of us just learn to ignore her drama, but it's like she feeds off control. And the wild part: her husband Tom backs her up on everything. He walks around like he owns the block, flashing his badge at HOA meetings like it means something in a residential discussion. When I first heard Karen complaining about her water, I actually felt bad. I didn't know our lines were that old and possibly connected underground. So I looked into it and even called a plumber to inspect the setup. That's when things started to feel off. The plumber said there shouldn't be a shared line between our homes unless someone illegally tapped into it. I didn't want to believe that, but it raised questions. Still, instead of talking like adults, Karen jumped straight to threats and lawsuits. The legal notice they sent was written like something pulled from a crime thriller, accusing me of sabotage, property interference, and get this, causing her severe hydration anxiety. I didn't even know that was a thing, but it got worse. I started noticing Tom sitting in his parked car across from my driveway late at night, just sitting there. Watching, it started to feel less like a neighbor dispute and more like intimidation. And that's when I knew something bigger was going on here. This wasn't just about water. Something didn't add up with how fast they jumped to legal action, and what I eventually discovered about their past made my stomach drop. But I wasn't ready to go public, Kate. After a couple of days of silence, I started doing some digging of my own. I pulled property records, utility maps, even old blueprints from the city archives. That's when I noticed something strange. Karen's house wasn't even supposed to be on the same water grid as mine. According to the original plans, her property had a separate connection routed to the back alley. So how was she getting water from my side? I called the plumber back and asked him to check the underground lines more thoroughly. Sure enough, he found an extra PVC pipe branching from my line toward her foundation. It looked like someone had tapped into it years ago. No permits, no documentation, just a quiet little theft buried under dirt and time. That's when it clicked. Karen wasn't mad that I shut off my water. She was mad because she was secretly using it, and I, unknowingly, cut her off. But instead of coming clean, she sent her co-lawyer husband to threaten me with a lawsuit to keep the truth buried. Meanwhile, the rest of the neighborhood started noticing strange things too. One neighbor said his water pressure had always seemed lower when Karen ran her sprinklers. Another swore she saw contractors sneaking around Karen's backyard months ago, but didn't think anything of it. It was like a puzzle coming together piece by piece. Then the picture wasn't pretty. But while I was collecting facts, Karen was still playing dirty. Suddenly, I started getting HOA violation letters. My lawn was too dry, my trash bins weren't secured properly, and someone filed a noise complaint about my garage door. It was so petty, it almost felt like a joke. Except it wasn't. They were clearly trying to pressure me from every angle, legally, socially, emotionally, and through all this, I couldn't shake the feeling that Karen and Tom were hiding more than just a water connection. Something deeper was bubbling under the surface. And I was getting too close. At this point, I felt like I was living inside some weird neighborhood thriller. Every day brought something new, more HOA letters, random cars slowly driving past my house, and even one morning when someone tossed a dead plant onto my porch with a note that said, "Hope your water stays off." It was childish, but it still rattled me. I couldn't prove who was behind it, but I didn't need to. It had Karen's passive-aggressive signature all over it. I knew I had to protect myself. So I started documenting everything: photos, videos, call logs, even the plumber's findings. I set up a security camera by my driveway, and sure enough, it caught Tom walking across my yard one night and standing near the water meter box. He didn't touch anything, but he stood there for a good minute, looking around like he was checking something or maybe just trying to send a message. That clip gave me chills. I took everything to a lawyer. He was shocked at how fast things had escalated over what was basically utility theft and intimidation. He told me to be careful, to stay civil, and most importantly, to keep collecting evidence. That's when I found out something that made my heart race. Tom wasn't just any lawyer. He had been reprimanded before for using his legal badge to threaten civilians in a previous job. It was buried deep in a complaint report, but it was there. This wasn't just some coincidence. This was a pattern. Karen and Tom had done this before, something like it. They knew the system, knew how to scare people just enough to make them back off. But this time, they picked the wrong neighbor. I wasn't going to roll over. The more they pushed, the more determined I got to bring everything into the light. And just when I thought I'd seen it all, something showed up in my mailbox that changed everything. A single document with one signature that could flip this entire fight upside down. The envelope looked official, no return address, just my name typed neatly on the front. I opened it, expecting maybe another threat or a legal warning. But instead, what I found made my hands go cold. It was a copy of a signed utility agreement from nearly 10 years ago. And on it was Karen's signature authorizing a temporary water connection to my line during some remodeling she had done back then. According to the document, it was supposed to be disconnected after 60 days, but that never happened. She had been tapping into my water ever since. What made it even more shocking? The form was never filed with the city. It was one of those shady side deals, and it looked like whoever had given me this document wanted me to see it now, at this moment. Someone was leaking info from the inside, maybe a former contractor. Maybe even someone who had finally had enough of Karen's games. I didn't know who sent it, but they clearly wanted the truth out. As I stared at that paper, my phone buzzed. It was a neighbor I barely talked to, quiet guy, kept to himself. He asked if we could meet privately. When we did, he looked nervous, glancing over his shoulder like he didn't want to be seen. Then he dropped a bomb. A few years ago, Tom had approached him with a similar water-sharing arrangement, said it would help during construction. But when the neighbor declined, Tom started threatening him with code violations and even hinted at legal trouble if he didn't comply. He never went forward with it, but the fear stuck with him. That's when I realized this wasn't just about my house. It was a pattern. Karen and Tom had been quietly pulling strings in the neighborhood for years, intimidating, manipulating, using their positions to scare people into silence. And now that someone was finally pushing back, they were willing to go to any lengths to shut it down. But the real kicker? That document in my hand was dated just 3 weeks before Karen's lawsuit against me. She knew exactly what she was doing.